Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with a story of grief and the tragedies addiction and trauma can bring. Those tragedies happen in every corner of Manitoba to families of all socioeconomic backgrounds. But in a remote community where resources and supports are few, drugs can take an especially heavy toll. As CBC's Stephanie Cram shows us, a Manitoba First Nation is calling for sweeping changes to keep its people safe from drugs. And a warning, sensitive viewers may find this story upsetting.
St. Theresa Point First Nation just buried 2 young girls who were found frozen outside earlier this month. One of those girls, Dana Shingoose, the other, her friend. The chief of that community believes the girls died because of drugs.
The premature and needless dying of our youth caused by drugs must stop, not in the future, but now.
The First Nation is a dry community, but Flett says drugs are being smuggled in by plane or on the winter road. Now the First Nation wants the power to search people's bags.
We want the provincial government to allow First Nations to physically search passenger luggage at airports serving the First Nation and especially St. Theresa Point.
The chief says in the past they would search all luggage and cargo coming into the community, but people complained, so they stopped. Calls for help is something that has become all too familiar for Grand Chief Kathy Merrick from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs.
When are we going to quit calling for press conferences to be able to address these issues? These things need to be implemented immediately in our communities. And if people don't like their suitcases being searched going into First Nations communities, well, don't go there then.
Perimeter, the primary airline serving St. Theresa Point, says they are working with First Nations to improve security measures and will soon introduce body scanners and drug-sniffing dogs at the Winnipeg terminal.
We have been listening to the requests from the Chief and Council. I believe they acknowledge the help and assistance that we have provided, but we want to take it one step further.
Change can't come soon enough.
It's devastating to the community. It's devastating to the families. It's devastating to the grandfathers.
The province says they are committed to ensuring all First Nations are safe, but say the random search of luggage is a threat to the privacy of passengers and infringes on their constitutional rights.
And Stephanie Cram joins us in the studio now. Steph, I know you spoke with the grandfather of one of the girls, Dana Shingoose. How is he doing?
Yeah, I spoke to Albert Shingoose. He says that their family is still coping. They're taking it day by day. They're getting better slowly, but they're still grieving. Albert says he agrees with everything that the chief says today, and he says that the drug crisis in the community has to be stopped.
Now, of course, St. Theresa Point isn't the only community struggling and asking for help. We've heard more cries for help recently. Tell us about those.
Earlier this week, the Keewatin Tribal Council, which includes 11 First Nations in northern Manitoba, they declared a regional state of emergency. Some of the issues they're dealing with are drugs, the lack of mental health supports, suicide, and they're also lacking essential infrastructure like clean running water in some cases, and also the lack of policing and all access roads to the community. So the chief today of St. Theresa Point says he agrees with everything that the KTC says, but his community at this point is not at the point of declaring a state of emergency.
There's so much that communities are facing, so hard to create a sense of hope for the youth as well. What about St. Theresa Point? What's its next step?
Yeah, well, the RCMP says that they are dedicated to tackling drug trafficking in these communities. Their Project Dog Pound has been working really hard to dismantle drug trafficking networks, which they say are smuggling drugs into small communities like St. Theresa Point. Today, the chief says that they have lost trust in the RCMP and they want an investigation into the death of these 2 young girls to be done by an outside police organization. And for Albert Shingoose, he says he wants to see more mental health supports and addiction services in the community, specifically for youth. He says the starting point of that is listening to what they need.
Stephanie Cram, thank you for this.
Thank you.